President Biden fighting for his political future and insisting he will stay in the race despite growing fears that he may not be fit for office. More Democrats are panicking about the president's 2024 prospects, and there are increasing calls from within Biden's own party for him to bow out. The president now heading to the battleground state of Wisconsin and sitting down for his first television interview since last week's poor debate performance. All upcoming appearances seen by his re-election campaign as an opportunity to change the public narrative. Joining us now to break it all down, The Hill's Mychael Schnell. Mychael, good having you. Trump is really seizing on this disarray among Democrats, and he is now challenging the president to another debate. There's been some questions about the chances Biden won't go up against Trump on stage again after struggling in the first debate. Mychael, has Biden's team responded to Trump at this point?
Yeah, we have not heard anything from Biden's campaign, the White House, in response to this statement this morning from former President Trump, essentially challenging President Biden, as you mentioned, to another debate, writing on Truth Social, quote, "Let's do another debate, but this time no holds barred, all on discussion with just the two of us on stage talking about the future of our country." Now, of course, there is that second debate already scheduled for September, though, as you mentioned, there are some real questions about whether former President Trump will take part in that debate after just this disastrous performance by President Biden, some questions of whether or not he'll want to get back on the debate stage and give the president another opportunity to redeem himself. And on the other side of the coin, there's some questions on if President Biden will take the debate stage again after that poor performance. So a lot of questions swirling right now, but of course, there's a lot of time until September. But nonetheless, former President Trump right there upping the pressure on President Biden about a week after that debate performance.
Possibly a make or break moment for Biden, his sit-down interview happening later tonight and airing on ABC. Will this type of interview effectively shift the narrative? Could it be enough?
I mean, the Biden campaign certainly hopes it will be. They're sitting down, President Biden sitting down with George Stephanopoulos for this interview tonight. I just spoke to a House Democrat who told me that, one interview and a rally after that debate, which 40 million people saw, is not going to cut it. So the Biden campaign likely going to have to do more of these appearances with these off-the-cuff moments for President Biden. But nonetheless, they are taking the first step towards that with this interview tonight with George Stephanopoulos. A lot of pressure on the president and on George Stephanopoulos heading into it. A lot riding on Biden's campaign with this interview.
A holiday weekend, certainly not great for ratings. Now, a group of 168 business leaders are calling on Biden to step aside, sending a letter to the president urging him to end his re-election bid, rather. How bad is it getting for Biden when this type of coalition turns their back on him?
I mean, it's certainly not helpful, right? Any of these headlines, any of these letters of folks calling on President Biden to step aside is not what the Biden campaign or the White House wants to see. But this one in particular is pretty interesting. It was, according to the Washington Post, it was organized by a group called Leadership Now Project, which was founded in 2018 in response to these rising concerns about threats to democratic norms. And some of the folks, according to Washington Post, who signed this are some big name people like Chrissy Walton, who's the billionaire daughter-in-law of the founder of Walmart. There's retired NFL commissioner Paul T. Tagliabue. I think I botched his name there, but the former NFL commissioner, and some other big name people. So again, never headlines that the Biden campaign or the White House wants to see, but it just adds this sort of narrative and these questions after the debate performance.
Biden has been relying heavily on his family's advice following his poor debate performance. That includes his wife, Jill, his sister, Valerie, and his son, Hunter. Are there concerns within the Democratic Party that he's listening too much to his family and not enough to lawmakers and party officials?
Unclear right now within the Democratic Party, but I can tell you there are some concerns within the Republican Party, specifically the portion of this that Hunter Biden is now advising his father amid this post-debate turmoil. The White House did confirm that he had been part of some post-debate conversations in the White House, and we're already seeing some fallout from that among Republicans. Mike Turner, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, wrote a letter to the White House requesting a full accounting of any classified information discussed or disclosed in meetings that Hunter Biden attended with his father. Turner writing, quote, "According to news reporting, the president's son's sudden presence at official meetings has caused confusion for some White House staff, prompting a reaction of, quote, what the hell is happening?" So some fallout right there. Whether or not the White House cooperates with this from Chairman Turner remains to be seen. But definitely I expect this to be a topic of conversation when lawmakers return to Washington next week.
Mychael, former Obama administration official Van Jones says Democrats are actually discussing concrete steps of how to replace Biden. It's a done deal. Who is he suggesting Democrats will put forward instead?
Yeah, these were interesting comments from Van Jones on CNN, now with CNN, formerly with the Obama White House. Essentially, Van Jones is saying that he sees Vice President Kamala Harris that as an assumption that she would be next in line for the presidential slot. Then there were questions about who would Kamala Harris's vice president be. And we've already seen the names floating around just in this post-debate conversation. People like California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. The list goes on and on. But whether or not, we'll have to just keep an eye on those conversations and see who emerges in front. But Van Jones saying that it would be just a given that Vice President Kamala Harris would move up to the presidential spot.
Biden and Trump are polling dead even in a new Reuters and Ipsos poll that came out on Wednesday. Yet a recent CNN poll shows that Kamala Harris is actually polling better against Trump than Biden. How is the Biden campaign digesting these types of numbers?
Well, the Biden campaign actually tried to pre-butt these post-debate numbers. So in a memo that the campaign put out right after the debate, they essentially said, look, we know that the polls are going to move in the aftermath of this debate, actually blaming it on the media, saying the polls are going to move because of this media push narrative about the president. So they were sort of trying to get ahead of it. Another thing we've seen the Biden campaign do is put out their own internal polling numbers, which has shown that Biden is behind former President Trump, but showing that the numbers before and after the debate weren't too much of a difference to supplement their argument that the debate didn't make that much of an impact on the race. But nonetheless, these numbers are moving that gap between former President Trump and President Biden, widening in the aftermath, though the Biden campaign saying that this is because of a media push narrative and them betting on the fact that they will boomerang back in the weeks and months to come.
Mychael, the Biden campaign just unveiled a massive $50 million media blitz that will target battleground state voters. Is this the center of their strategy to salvage Biden's campaign at this point? I mean, what exactly is involved in this new push?
I wouldn't say that it's the center of it, but it's definitely an aspect of it. We're also seeing the interview with George Stephanopoulos today. We've seen President Biden speak to supporters, be on the rally stage. But essentially what we're seeing with this ad buy, it's a TV, radio, and ad buy that'll target voters in battleground states. It's going to focus on issues like abortion, the economy, and painting former President Trump as a threat to American democracy, also including the rule of law. These are meant to be part of very diverse audiences, including the 2024 Olympics, the Bachelorette season premiere, and during the Republican National Convention. So the Biden campaign right there trying to get a lot of eyeballs on these ads as they are just working to prop up the president and avoid any more fallout from that really disastrous debate on the part of the president.
That's right. The campaign clearly on course correction here, but at least 3 House Democrats have publicly called for Biden to drop out, and they want to put forward a new nominee. How has Biden attempted to shore up support among rank-and-file Democrats?
Yeah, well, we've seen we've heard that President Biden has spoken to top congressional leaders, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, source familiar, telling The Hill that they did speak this week. So there are a lot of these conversations happening behind the scenes. I will note 3 is a notable number, that 3 have come out against President Biden, saying he should step down from the top of the ticket. But there are 435 members of the House, about half of that remaining in the belonging to the Democratic Party. So I'm going to be interested in seeing how that number changes, likely grows next week when Congress returns to session, and these lawmakers can't avoid reporter questions about the question of whether or not President Biden should remain at the top of the ticket. And then we'll see how the Biden campaign responds to that, because as this number continues to grow, it becomes more and more of a problem for the Biden campaign.
Yes, lawmakers will be back next week after the holiday, and they will have a chance to meet face-to-face to really talk about Biden's future. They're also preparing for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address this month. Biden and Netanyahu spoke on the phone Thursday as a framework for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel comes into focus. Is the White House providing a readout of this particular call?
Yeah, we did get a readout from this call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, part of it saying, quote, President Biden and the Prime Minister discussed ongoing efforts to finalize a ceasefire deal together with the release of hostages, as outlined by President Biden and endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7, and countries from around the world. The leaders discussed the recent response received from Hamas. So a lot going on there. This, of course, all in preparation and ahead of later this month when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to visit the Capitol and deliver a speech to a joint meeting of Congress. A very important moment in U.S.-Israeli relations and, of course, an important moment in the Israel-Hamas war. So there's going to be a lot to talk about in the coming weeks about Prime Minister Netanyahu and his speech to Congress.
Now, new this morning, the Labor Department reported employees added 206,000 jobs in June, and the unemployment number rose slightly to 4.1% from a 4% level in May. Overall, it's pretty decent for the White House here. I mean, still, poll after poll shows that voters are upset about the economy. Why is there this disconnect?
Yeah, that is the key question, and something that I bet Biden campaign officials and White House officials are constantly asking them, because the numbers are looking pretty decent. And, prices have gone down. The stock market is up. There are more jobs. The unemployment is lower, but for some reason, it's just not translating among the electorate and among voters. We've seen that in poll after poll. It's a big question for the Biden campaign and the White House, something that can maybe bring in questions of, are they messaging these numbers properly, what have you. But I can tell you it's definitely a conversation that's been underway in Washington as we see these numbers just have such a disconnect with where the electorate is on the economy.
And if he stays in the race, Biden will certainly have to change those numbers around when it comes to voters' views on the economy. Now, President Biden did cancel his scheduled appearance before the National Education Association after the teachers union went on strike. This was supposed to happen on Sunday. Mychael, throughout his presidency, Biden has offered support for organized unions. What's your understanding of why he pulled out?
Yeah, President Biden essentially said that he wasn't going to want to cross the picket line. So we have a statement from the campaign saying, quote, President Biden is a fierce supporter of unions and he won't cross the picket line. The president is still planning to travel to Pennsylvania this weekend, and we will have more details to share at a later point, end quote. But essentially just this morning, this strike happening from the National Education Association staff organizations. The group is arguing that the country's largest teachers union has not been bargaining over unilateral changes, and essentially accusing the NEA of wage theft and failing to provide information about outsourcing of $50 million to contractors. So a lot of disagreements there. But the political perspective and the political angle is President Biden says that he will not cross the picket line. Of course, he said that he's a very pro-union president. We'll leave it there. The Hill's Mychael Schnell. Thank you. Thanks so much. Extreme pride in being an American is near a record low. That's according to a new Gallup survey released shortly before the 4th of July holiday. The survey found that 41% of Americans were extremely proud of their American identity. That's a slight increase from 39% in 2023 and 38% in 2022, the lowest since Gallup started asking the question in 2001. Gallup says the highest sense of pride was reported in 2001 after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Missouri has filed a lawsuit against New York State aimed at lifting former President Trump's gag order. They say that Trump's hush money trial was politically motivated and that the gag order is interfering with Missourians' rights to hear from a presidential candidate. The Show Me state is also seeking to delay the former president's sentencing until after the November election. Trump was convicted of all 34 counts of falsifying business records and is set to be sentenced in September. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.